guys, girls, non-binds, I am Leah Solmaz. Welcome to my YouTube channel if you haven't been before. Yeah, I'm about to read chapter 1 and 2 of my debut novel, Nexus Book 1. It is a dark fantasy adventure book, so if you're into the likes of Lord of the Rings, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, if you like monsters and demons and magic and good versus evil, stick around. Was that smooth? I don't know. Bit of a backstory. Initially it was going to be a graphic novel. I actually found the notebooks the other day with the panels. Yeah, I planned, I think, the majority of it out. And yeah, it also features some interesting character designs. Let's just say the main character, Brianna, looks a bit worse for wears in that. So it was initially going to be a graphic novel, then a film script that... and then after meeting C.L. Raven, two amazing horror writing twins, I got inspired to self-publish a novel, and here it is. A massive love to those awesome ladies. They are multi-talented and amazing, and go follow them. I'll drop all their social media down below. And the guy behind the cover, Theo Garvey, he is just amazing. Please go check out his artwork and things. He's a professional artist and I love his style. It's just so unique and spot on. He's an awesome filmmaker as well, and he's also got a YouTube channel, so please go over and subscribe to him and show him some love. And yeah, I'll drop all of his social down below as well. I thought I'd do chapter 1 and 2, by the way. There is an audio version already on my channel featuring the beautiful, talented actress Hannah Douglas. She reached chapter 1. So yeah, in case you get fed up of my Brummy accent, do head down and give that a listen to. She does an amazing job. She's a fantastic actress. That's it, that's enough talking, isn't it? Let's get into reading. And I have got some awesome fantasy music going in the background. I'll drop a link to that. Oh my god, I'm such a lame-o. Oh shoot. Plus I'm sober as well, so I'm like doubly nervous. Yeah, okay. And if I slur, you know it's not alcohol, it's just my accent. Okay. Chapter 1. Please, you don't have to do this. Daylight was almost spent as the billowing fog arrived and took Bedlam hostage. Not only was the city dizzy from the rat race week, but now it had the premise of another hapless face of nature to contend with. The fog. Fight him. Do not let his serpent tongue poison your heart. Kill him. Flashes of blue lightning accompanied the menacing cloud. It swept through the grey buildings and neon lights of Bedlam and held an eerie tone to it. It cocooned the city in a thick whispering haze that saw the constant humdrum of traffic become a dull buzz. The residents retreated to the safety of their homes, not daring to venture out into the unknown. They were accustomed to the comfort of the concrete labyrinth that surrounded them. Whenever Mother Nature would sweep in for a lively visit, the easy living city of Bedlam would be thrown into chaos. The temperatures that summer had risen to unseen heights, which had produced an increase in tropical storms. These violent storms would charge in and relentlessly rage. They'd erupt and dance fiercely for a couple of hours before disappearing in an uncharted fashion. I wrote this. Oh, by the way, grab snacks if you need to, and drinks, and yeah. Page 2 of 200 and something. Oh my god. It's not too late, please. The pressure, suffocating and weighty, pulsed through the air as the night began her ritual. It spoke of something more than just the erratic temperament of weather. Something more than nature, unnatural. Perhaps something completely and wholly supernatural. No. A gut-wrenching scream rose like a spiralling whirlwind through the air, bellowing through the stone blocks of St. Dymphna's church. What? A quickened breath echoed through the chilled and empty church, and there on the fuchsia carpet beneath the altar sat the panic-stricken tattooist. Dax blinked furiously through the dark, before crawling back like some feral oh my god, wow. Dax blinked furiously through the dark before crawling back like some feral animal escaping a threat. He cowered at the sight before him. Never in his life had he seen anything as nauseating or as horrifying as that which lay barely a foot away from his black, weathered boots. Father Flanagan's face, pale and petrified, stared up to the shadows that blanketed the arched ceiling of St. Dymphna's. A thick, wine-coloured string of blood dangled and dripped from his mouth. "Oh God," Dax whispered. Dax Miller had lived in the Boroughs all of his life. It was a district of Bedlam that became the punchline of any wealthy bureaucrat's joke. The Boroughs had produced a number of unwarranted stories over the years. Beat-up hookers and scabby sword and junkies were seen as the norm on the streets. So much so that Dax had become accustomed to the brutal face of the district from an early age. At the hands of his own junkie mother Jan, he had seen certain things that were less than age appropriate. Even in Dax's line of work, he had dealt with some stomach-churning sights firsthand. A few of his clients were bleeders. Their thin skin tore all too easily under the needle's unforgiving point. Some clients were fainters and others were pukers. The pukers were usually male tattoo virgins. They would brashly burst into the store, chests puffed out, noses in the air, and gruffly demand some monstrous tattoo that they decided on over breakfast. When it came to the crunch, that's when their machismo was really put to the test, and 9 times out of 10 they would share their breakfast with the floor. Getting ahead of myself. These particular clients were so reliable in their failures that Dax and his business partner Abel would often place bets on how long a customer would last before the pain and experience became too much for their weakened stomachs to handle. It was safe to say Dax had a stronger tolerance than most, but this distressing, unparalleled scene before him, however, tore through those limits. His eyes widened as his gaze fell to the catalyst of this unearthly vision. The dead priest's chest was splayed inside out. Organs and bones, crushed and broken, were covered in a slime-like matter of blood and fatty pus. What was once the godly man's intestines appeared to have been clawed out, squashed into eminent pulp. A bile bubbled up in the back of Dax's throat, and he grabbed his mouth in reflex. His breath caught as the undeniable smell of iron filled his nose. His hands shook as he pulled them away from his mouth, and he saw the darkened stains. Dried blood marred every crease of his fingers and palms. His titanium cotton t-shirt was also covered like some abstract painting where the artist had flicked his paintbrush with an aimless cause. Instead of an expansive colour wheel, however, there were only varying shades of red and pink. There were only varying shades of red and pink. Pea-sized, slimy matter dangled from the cotton fibres. Remnants of some part of the priest's organs. A violent wave of nausea crashed over Dax, and he vomited. A lone snap coffee break. A lone snap sailed through the chilled air, followed by another. Dax jerked as his gaze found the source of applause. The clapping figure strolled down the aisle and homed in on the shaken tattooist. Perfectly formed white teeth glistened in the dark. Long platinum grey hair flowed over broad shoulders and fell upon an ashy trench coat. His facial features held an unorthodox lure to them. Handsome yet unnerving. He looked like a man, but there was something more to his presence. Dax could sense it. The applause came to an abrupt, echoing stop. A stranger stepped onto the altar, stooped down to Dax's level, and the pair stared at each other. One set of eyes wide and teary, the other cold and steely. "You've done well." The stranger's voice held a gravelly, commanding tone to it. It was almost familiar. Dax found strength in his shaky state and stumbled to his feet. He was in no state to fight, and he didn't trust his knees to keep from buckling if he suddenly needed to take flight. All he could do was watch as the ominous man calmly rose to match the tattooist's height. Dax flinched as the man took a step forward. And by some unknown stroke of luck, he managed to bring her here. I have to say I'm rather impressed with his choice. You may actually have it in you to open the gate. The stranger spoke with patronising commendation. Dax followed the man's eyeline. A gasp escaped the tattooist's mouth on seeing another body strewn a few feet away. Brianna Lane. Her skin still held colour to it in contrast to the pale dead priest between them. Dax couldn't see any signs of breathing, however. Had Dax killed her too? As if by scripted cue, the unkissed sleeping beauty coughed herself into cognition and her eyelids fluttered before slowly rolling open. Long burgundy hair spilled forth like stage curtains as Brianna pushed against the cold carpet. Dax turned his attention from the woman back to his male companion. The man smirked menacingly as his chin dipped towards the redhead. With an unquestioning will, Dax rallied to Brianna's side. "No, get away, where am I?" Brianna became frantic under the weight of the tattooist's frame. Dax wrapped his trembling arms around her shoulders and tried to lift her up. "We have to get out of here," Dax sobbed. "What do you mean? Who? Where?" Brianna's eyes searched the Gothic architecture, looking for the answers to her ignored questions. Her head snapped in the direction of Father Flanagan's decimated corpse. A spine-chilling scream ripped up through her lungs, and instinctively she fell into Dax's protective embrace. She clung desperately to his shirt. It felt papery to the touch. Something wasn't right. Dax tried desperately to get Brianna to her feet, but her body stilled. Dark stains covered his callous hands. Fears swelled in her chest. No, get off me. Brianna fought against Dax. "Enough with this game, Dax. Kill her and finish this." The strange man drew back the lapel of his trench coat and produced an ornate sacrificial dagger. Digger? He produced a digger. We're gonna get some work done. Oh my god, where did that accent come from? The strange man drew back the lapel of his trench coat and produced an ornate sacrificial dagger. The handle was made of onyx, and the gold carvings of which glimmered under the faint moonlight that trickled in through the stained glass windows. Brianna screamed even louder, hoping someone would hear her and rush in to save her. She clenched her fist and landed a frenzied punch to Dax's face, knocking him back. Brianna breathlessly scrambled and sprinted for the doors. The stranger intercepted, and the terrified woman... Oh my god, wow. The stranger intercepted the terrified woman. He snatched up Brianna's arm and stood strong against her, struggling. Brianna, we need to cut out your heart while it's still beating. Try not to panic so much so that you end up having a heart attack. Brianna screamed as the man brandished the blade. "Let her go," Dax yelled after regaining his balance. I don't know why I'm smiling, it's such like an intense scene. Oh my god. Okay. A quiet whistle sliced through the air. Brianna jumped as an arrow burst through her captor's shoulder, stopping short of the redhead's cheek. The man's face held no emotion as he glanced down at the arrowhead. Dax tackled the unnamed man and successfully pulled Brianna from his grip. The tattooist and waitress toppled over one another before Dax resumed his earlier efforts of helping Brianna to her feet. "Brianna, quickly!" Another woman's voice reverberated against the church walls. Brianna and Dax scanned the dark shadows. A woman dressed all in black was crouched by a nearby pillar. The pulled-up hoodie gave way to a determined brow and stern jade eyes. The woman readied another bolt to her crossbow and aimed at the wounded man. "No, she is ours," the man yelled. Something in Dax stirred. Growling and teeth clenched, he catapulted Brianna forward, turned back, and threw his fist as hard as he could into the man behind. Brianna raced over to the hooded woman, deeming her a safer bet than that of the knife-wielding maniac on the altar. The archer fired another bolt at her target, and it landed with a crunch into his sternum. Instead of reloading and firing another, she snatched up Brianna's hand and dragged the waitress with her along the back wall. Feet echoed across the marble tiles as the pair ploughed ahead towards the side door. Spying the green illuminated fire exit sign ahead, Brianna snagged at the fingerless gloved hand of her rescuer. "We can't leave him." The waitress craned her Jesus, that's painful. The waitress craned her neck over her shoulder and watched as Dax struggled against the death-like grip of the man in the trench coat. Blood now poured from the I think I'm blowing bubbles. Yeah. Blood now poured from the tattooist's nose and busted lip, and he gasped in pain as his opponent kneed his side. The hooded woman pushed open the door. Brianna desperately yanked at her shoulder, and reluctantly the archer glanced at the two men fighting beyond the church pews. "Trust me, he is beyond saving, Brianna." Brianna tried to formulate an argument, a reason, something to persuade the other woman that Dax was worth saving. He had helped her. He had tried to help her. That's in the book. I'm making up words now. Why couldn't they help him? Then her brain sent a chilling thought to halt her words. A second guessing was one of her greatest hindrances, or allies. She was never sure until after the moment of reasoning had passed. Brianna realised she didn't even know him. She had no idea how she wound up in that church to begin with, let alone whether or not Dax was really going to save her or kill her. Unable to fight the fleeing instinct further, Brianna surrendered and followed the woman out of the violent confines of St. Dimphner's. The young tattooist held on and threw punches non-stop. Each one became lighter and weaker until his arms became heavy and he finally wore himself into a lull. The unnamed man had entertained Dax's persistence long enough. With no more than a swing of his forearm, he sent Dax hurtling some 7 or 8 feet through the air. Dax, exhausted from the fight, couldn't even yell out in pain as his body crashed into one of the mahogany benches, completely snapping the hardwood in two. He accepted defeat, accepted whatever heinous death he was going to be met with. His whole body ached and burned, but Dax clambered away from the crash site and fell to his knees. He clutched his side through the sweat-soaked t-shirt. There was a high probability he had broken 1 or 2 ribs in the collision. Dax spat out the dribbling blood that fell over his top lip and met his enemy's eyes. The man in the trench coat grimaced in turn as he yanked the 2 bolts from his body before nonchalantly throwing them aside. He crossed the church floor in a couple of strides. His free hand wrapped around Dax's throat. "What are you?" Dax asked. "Oh, my boy, you should already know. Satan." With his ribs already With his ribs already This might have actually been more fun if I was drunk, I don't know. Time. 20 minutes. With his ribs already agonizingly... Oh my god. With his ribs already agonizingly... as it... Oh my god. I think I'm just going to skip words that I can't actually say. It's weird that I can write them, but I can't actually say them. With his ribs already with his ribs already tight, Dax inhaled sharply when the man erupted into raucous laughter. He released his weary opponent and paced across the floor, with the playing with the dagger in his hands. Oh, my nose. Before replacing it in his coat. Still in the thralls of hysterics, the man shoved Dax, forcing him to sit down on one of the intact benches. Oh, Dax, you give me far too much credit. I am Ashmedai, Asmodeus, he bowed. Dax wasn't sure whether or not he should clap, but before he could ask, the production was short-lived and Asmodeus straightened his posture. His steely yellow eyes fixed on the dishevelled tattoos. It's time you learned your place. Brianna clumsily followed the hooded woman through a gritty alleyway that tapered onto an empty back street. Their destination became clearer as they approached the waiting car. The beige body almost merged with the warm fog. The engine purred and the red brake lights glowed against the night's haze, and the smoke of the exhaust pipe. Let me read that again. The engine purred and the red brake lights glowed against the night. Oh my god, words! Writing is a lot easier than speaking. Boom. The engine purred and the red brake lights glowed against the night's haze and the smoke of the exhaust pipe. That makes sense now. The passenger's door clicked and flew open to reveal a burly bald man in the driver's seat. Kara, thank the elders, I was about to come looking for you. Friend or foe, Brianna thought. The hooded woman, Kara, opened the adjoining door to the back seat for Brianna and wasted no time in climbing in next to the driver. Brianna, get in. How did she know her name? Brianna all but fell into the back seat, lightly bumping her head on the way in. So now she's concussed. As soon as the doors were closed, the car hurtled out of the parking space and onto the main road. The car whizzed along the vacant roads. The time of night and the weather were keeping people from travelling. Kara lowered her hood to reveal short dark hair and she threw her unloaded crossbow on the back seat beside Brianna. Do you think he'll follow? The driver asked. We should only anticipate it, Kara replied. All the R's. What the hell is going on? Brianna asked. No, she didn't. What the hell? What the hell is going on? Yikes. Hopefully this is entertaining for people. I don't know. Maybe people have already switched it on. Oh, Jesus. Wow. I think after chapter 1 I'm making a coffee. And maybe have a shot of wine or something. Yeah, let's go back to that. Do you think he'll follow? The driver asked. We should only anticipate it, Kara replied. What the hell is going on? Brianna pulled against both chairs in front. Deft choice of words the driver offered in jest. None of this makes sense. I mean, that guy was going to kill me, right? Brianna exhaled through a stammer. This is neither the time or place, Kara said. That wasn't good enough. No, this is the perfect time. Who are you people? You're definitely not cops, I know that much. Kara inhaled deeply before turning in her seat. She pointed in turn at the driver, then to herself. Aiden, Kara, we're here to help you. That is all you need to know. Bullshit. Brianna, sit back and shut up. Hayden jumped at his comrade's raised voice. He gripped the steering wheel a little tighter and tried his best to focus through the fog. His eyes darted between the rear view and side mirrors. No! Aiden rolled his eyes and silently wished Brianna had conceded. One authoritative woman was not to contend with. Do you not think I have the right to know why there's some crazy guy out there who wants me dead? She makes a fair point. When we have reached safety, then we will tell you. For now, I need you to trust us. That was quite tame for Kara, Aiden mused. Trust you? Are you kidding me? If you want to live, yes, you must trust us, Kara growled back. Brianna laughed in disbelief and shook her head. What else could she do? She sat back roughly in her seat and folded her arms like a scolded child. A moment later, Brianna was jolted forward. She pushed against Kara's seat to save her face from pummeling the headrest. The speeding car came to a screeching halt and all three passengers stared at the road in front. Brianna hunched forward and squinted through the windshield. Is that a kid? Indeed, there, blocking their path, appeared to be a young boy. Or at least he looked like a boy. His head hung lowly, making it hard to trace any discernible features. He was certainly the same height as the small child, but one thing was particularly odd about him. He was dressed in Victorian clothes. Brianna gulped as she came to her own realisation. He must be a ghost. Great! First dead priest and crazy guy, now ghost boy. Humour was Brianna's last line of defence. She wondered if she hadn't in fact died back at that church. That snow child. Kara's brow furrowed. Try not to blow bubbles again. So classy, wow. Kara's brow furrowed. Kara's brow furrowed and her hand wrapped around the door handle. His head lifted as the woman opened the car door. The headlights reflected a yellowish hue to the boy's eyes. His skin wasn't plump or fleshy in tone, but rather darkened and withered. His cheeks sallow and the skin wrinkled to accommodate a fiendish grin. Take her to Eileen's, Kara spoke. The gaze never left the boy. Aiden nodded. Before Brianna could protest, Kara had swiftly closed the car door. Aiden shifted the gear stick into reverse and his foot met furiously with the accelerator. The engine revved, the tyres squealed, however the car remained in place. Kara rounded the hood of the car and squared off with the boy. Again and again, Aiden tried to back the car away, but it was locked under an invisible vice. Held in place by the sheer wish of the strange youth. The boy laughed at the display, but laced in with his innocent chuckle there came a low, distorted voice that echoed. When the boy finally spoke, his mouth moved, but the sound followed after like that of a ventriloquist puppet. Foolish woman, she is ours. Let them go, Kara said. I'm trying to make it interesting. Shut up. She held up her hand. She held up her left hand and flexed her fingers. The heaviness that surrounded the car lifted, and Aiden was finally able to reverse. Wait! Brianna shouted. Aiden skillfully spun the steering wheel, flipping. Aiden skillfully spun the steering wheel, flipping the car around 180 degrees and sped off into the fog. Kara lowered her hand, and the boy's two-tone laughter filled the air again. He began to circle Kara in a predatory, stalking manner. Every now and then his phlegmy mouth like mine. Every now and then his phlegmy mouth would morph and snapped like a crocodile. Taking her from this world will not hinder his plans. You cannot stop the inevitable. You know this. I'm starting to remember why it is I hate you, Jin, so much. Kara calmly reached behind her back. You do an awful lot of talking. Her hand retrieved a knife, and not enough fighting. The boy's features withered completely to reveal blackened and rotten flesh. The djinn barked in pig Latin. "In order to bathe in my blood, you will have to kill me first," Kara said. Aiden sped away from the city, driving further into the fog. It only seemed to grow in density. It was as though someone had blanketed the car with a dusty cloth and blocked out all of the windows. The road couldn't be seen past an inch from the tyres. Brianna could all but hope Aiden wouldn't crash into something. She could hear the grumbling of thunder over the roar of the engine and peeling tyres, but much like the fog outside, a haze spilled over her eyes. Her head lolled as her vision grew unfocused and her mind spun dizzily. She could hardly make out Aiden's eyes as they watched her in the rearview mirror. Better you sleep. It's going to be a long journey. My God, it is. Aiden's voice became muffled and seemed to fall away. That entire night had finally caught up with Brianna, and she knew she couldn't fight the onslaught of exhaustion that washed over her. Her body swayed with the jostling of the car before she finally collapsed in her seat. She saw flashes behind her eyelids. Lightning. Each sparking bolt accompanied the roll of thunder that came from the clouds above. That is the end of chapter 1. I am going to make a coffee. Guys, girls, non-binds, if you don't mind. And yeah, let's into chapter 2. Yeah, by the way, this is your chance. Mind you, you can just pause the video if you want to grab a drink or snacks. Please feel free. It's £4.99, please. Oh, I'm joking. Yeah, let's, without further much ado. So classy, I know. And chapter 2. Let me just come to I'm kind of on the edge of the seat. With anticipation. Oh my God. Chapter 2. Plates clinking together, preceded by low whispering voices, were what finally pulled Brianna from her sleep. Her eyes twitched and slowly opened. An elderly woman, and who she recognised as Aiden, was heard quietly arguing. "She needs rest, Eiley, and buy the elders some time to properly adjust. We haven't time." Brianna blinked. That's my Eiley's voice. "We haven't time." Brianna blinked vigorously to shake off the gentle tug of sleep, and she heard Aiden oh God, wow. So, chapter 2. Plates clinking together, preceded by low whispering voices, were what finally pulled Brianna from her sleep. Her eyes twitched and slowly opened. That's the end of that sentence. An elderly woman, and who she recognised as Aiden, was heard quietly arguing. "She needs rest, Eiley, and buy the elders some time to properly adjust. We haven't time." Brianna blinked vigorously to shake off the gentle tug of sleep, and she heard Aiden dejectedly sigh. Footsteps bounced across the wooden floor below, followed by a heavy thud. Even the thud sounded defeated. Brianna saw that she was lying in a bed on a raised platform that was nestled quite close to the roof. The waitress stared hard at the ceiling, trying to work out what material it was that she was looking at. Moss, twigs, hay, a thatched roof, like one she had seen in a storybook, or maybe it was a history book. People still lived like that. Brianna turned her head to the balcony and saw that the thatched roof carried down into dried clay walls. There were no sharp angles like that of her apartment. Brianna carefully sat up in bed and looked around at the meagre furnishings that surrounded her. They looked like the kind of things you'd find in a bargain store, and were all crafted from wood or rattan. Peering over the balcony, she saw the glow of a fire that flickered round what she now gathered to be cottage walls. The waitress deftly climbed she climbed out of bed. The waitress deftly climbed out of the wooden bed to take a better look. The older woman idly backhanded Aidan's bald head. He tutted in response and glowered as Eiley hobbled over to the fireplace. A timid knock sounded at the front door. Aidan immediately drew his sword and stood to meet Eiley's movements. The blade itself startled Brianna, but she kept her composure and watched in brazen curiosity as the two crept and shuffled towards the entrance. "Is this the house of the Sooth?" A hushed voice came from outside. "What business brings you here?" Eiley growled, pulling open the door to reveal a farmer and his wife carrying their unconscious daughter between them. "Please, we need your help," the husband said. Folk in the village whispered amongst themselves and had told tales of a hideous and deformed goblin that lived in the woods. Although she was no beauty, she was far from a goblin. Aidan returned his sword to its scabbard. Eiley swatted his shoulders, signalling him to help carry the girl inside, and he aided the struggling farmer with his daughter. Brianna quietly crawled across the Hessian rug to take a closer look. Her burgundy hair peeked through the banister as she watched the curious scene unfold. "How long has she been feverish?" Eiley asked over her shoulder as she cleared the few items from the square table, giving the farm girl a landing pad. "Since the waning crescent," the timid wife responded. She was the one who knocked on the door, Eiley determined in her quiet sleuth mode. Eiley had already worked through the wife's life story just from the way the woman stood and spoke. One of many of the sage's gifts. The husband held a secret, the way his shoulders tensed after he had passed the girl over to Aidan's stronger hands. Perhaps a lover, Eiley pondered, but she decided to leave her silent investigation at that. The elderly woman waited for the girl to be placed onto the table before she laid her hand flat against the girl's forehead. Forehead or forehead? Her palm brushed back the strands of blonde hair that clung to the girl's pale skin. Drops of perspiration trickled under the sage's hand and down the girl's brow. "She's 14, Eiley asked. 6 days she will be, Mom," her father said. He suddenly remembered his manners and courteously took off his straw hat before wringing it in his hands. "The day she fell ill, she was playing near the brook, Mom. She just shy of the wheat fields." Eiley closed her eyes and grabbed the girl's hands. Random images flashed in her mind's eye. She was finding it difficult to recall the day that the girl had fallen ill, and more importantly, what had caused the ailment. All that was heard was the crackling of the fire behind. Eiley's eyes flung open and she turned to Aidan. Salt and sage. Oak chest beside the bookshelf, hurry. Aidan's feet thundered through the warped floorboards of the cottage as he dutifully ran to a nearby chest and began to pull out the requested ingredients. The local apothecary had never seen this kind of sickness, the father rambled as he watched Aidan. "Your daughter is not sick," Eiley said. The distressed mother opened her mouth to argue, but Eiley held up her hand to stop her. Eiley snatched the sage from Aidan and held it over the fireplace. A single flame flickered up and lit the end of the dried herb. Aidan placed a small... I totally dribbled then. I don't know if you'll see that. Try and cut that out. Eiley snatched the sage from Aidan and held it over the fireplace. A single flame flickered up and lit the end of the dried herb. Aidan placed a small handful of salt on the girl's forehead and throat. "I don't understand. You say our daughter is not sick, then what ails her?" The father placed an arm around his shaking wife. Eiley limped from the fireplace to the girl. The Sooth held the nervous parent's eyes and stated matter-of-factly, "Your daughter was not playing by the wheat fields, neither shy of them. She wandered onto Shadow Hill behind these woods, took a drink from the brook, and now has a wraith trying to take over her body." What? The panicked wife exhaled a sob into her husband's neck. Eiley brought the burning sage to the girl's face. Both Brianna and the girl's parents flinched, thinking Eiley was going to burn her. Instead, Eiley used the other hand to waft the smoke under the girl's nose. 2 small streams spiraled up into the girl's nostrils. Classy. A drawn-out gasp broke from her pursed lips, and her back arched, lifting off the table as her lungs expanded. Her mouth widened, and a bluish, thick cloud spilled out into the air. The cloud grew and transmuted into that of an unsightly disfigured old man, or rather a wraith, an angry spirit that clung desperately to the desire of being alive. Its joints snapped into place one by one as it turned to glare down at Eiley. An animalistic snarl came first, then a decrepit, albeit dangerous claw slashed down, coming close to Eiley's wrist. The undeterred Sooth blew a cloud of sage smoke in defence. The girl on the table winced in conjunction with the hissing wraith, and her protective mother motioned forward. "Stop, you're hurting her." "Be still." Eiley shoved the meek woman back and waved at the 2 men. "Hold the child down. He has already latched onto her body." Eiley shouted over the deafening, entwined scream that fell from the poor girl and the disgruntled wraith. Aidan and the girl's father raced forward. Between the pair of them, the girl proved to be difficult to restrain with her newfound strength, and at the same time both men were also trying to dodge the claws of the grotesque spirit above. Eiley picked up the pile of salt from the girl's throat and looped the smoke from the sage around her hand. The wraith snarled and hissed at Eiley as she threw the salt over her shoulder. Her wrinkled mouth quickly muttered a spell, but through all of the screaming and frenzy, even Aidan was unsure of what tongue it was that she was speaking in. When Eiley picked up the pile of salt from the girl's forehead, the wraith's cry became louder, and the fire behind rose to match in intensity. Eiley closed her eyes as she tossed the salt over her shoulder, and aptly blew out the sage. The wraith screamed in agony as it was ripped from the girl's body by an invisible assailant and towed up through the table chimney. The fire perished and plunged the cottage into complete darkness. The silence was marred by Aidan and the farmer's exhausted breaths. Eiley waited a few seconds before speaking. "Ish." Eiley's verbal command ignited the fire once more, and all of the occupants of the house breathed a sigh of relief as the girl could be seen unscathed. Oh my god! Her pale complexion had returned to a healthy glow, and her blue eyes shone brightly as she looked around the strange cottage. "Mama? Papa?" God almighty. Oh, Jesus. The girl innocently turned to her parents, wondering if she were in trouble. Aidan let go of the girl and stepped back so her parents could reassure her. Aidan and Eiley shared a knowing smile. Like that cheesy 80s moment, you know, where they're like... Aidan and Eiley shared a knowing smile as they watched both parents joyously sob over their saved daughter. A loud bang caught them all off guard, followed by a series of hurried footsteps. Brianna jumped down the crudely made wooden staircase and dashed straight out of the front door. Brianna's feet pounded along the sun-dried earth, aimlessly running deeper and deeper into the night. Her heart thundered against her tight chest. A heated sheen of perspiration clung to her trembling skin. She had no idea where she was, what was happening, or what that thing had been in the cottage. The trees around her became thick, and she scrambled over large roots and bramble. She was too high on adrenaline to allow the scratching branches to obstruct her sprint. Hot tears pricked at her eyes and streamed down her face. A distant light winked through the trees, a warm orange glow of hope, and she headed straight for it. Brianna tripped out from the bush. Where was I? Brianna tripped out from the bushes, skated down a bank and ran straight into the arms of a stranger. His hands were gloved. His body was wrapped in brown leather armour with a navy blue sash tied around his torso. Whoa, where did you come from? The man asked. Brianna couldn't form a syllable, let alone words, through her incessant sobs, so she gripped the man's arms a little tighter. He looked like a medieval guard. He led her over to his waiting comrade. Both men had been sat eating by the makeshift fire. The guard sat Brianna down on the log beside his colleague, and the two men looked around to determine whether or not the redhead was alone. Thank the elders, if that had been a banshee, I'd have scarfed, the first guard laughed to himself. You'd have pissed yourself, then scarfed. The guard took a seat beside Brianna and removed his gloves. She thought he was introducing himself, but instead he reached for Brianna's hair and brought a handful of it to his nose, inhaling deeply. Brianna batted his hand away and watched as his rescuing handsome features turned to a less than wholesome smirk. Definitely not a banshee. Brianna glanced between the two soldiers and realised they were both leering at her. She spied a nearby empty bottle of wine lying close by. Panic jump-started her brain. You've got to be kidding me. I haven't been with a woman in nigh 5 months, the smaller guard offered. Just your hand, the other joked. Brianna was completely speechless. Had she really just escaped one pit of danger only to land herself into another? The waitress shakily found her feet and both men mirrored her actions. It didn't take much more for Brianna's skin to break out into goosebumps, and a harrowing sensation filled her abdomen. Please, I just want to go home, Brianna sniffled. The taller guard quickly grabbed her hand and took an ominous step closer. How about we have some fun first, then you can go? No, get off, let me go. Go. The two guards easily picked Brianna up between themselves and carried her over to a patch of long grass. Brianna screamed in anguish and wriggled in their grasp. Keep her quiet, the smaller guard said as he struggled to restrain Brianna's flailing arms. Brianna fought desperately against the seizing guards. The smaller of the two laughed when his comrades quickly slapped Brianna, sending her into a daze. The familiar whistle of an arrow had gone unnoticed by them, and the first guard fell to the ground, howling in pain. The arrow lodged between his thigh and buttock, and a trail of blood oozed from the wound. The smaller guard released Brianna and drunkenly stumbled over to the fire where his sword lay. He drew the blade and stood squinting into the dark between the trees. Come on, you damn coward, show yourself, the guard shouted. A figure jumped over the fire and a brown boot brutally landed flat into the taunting guard's jaw. His injured comrade managed to stand and limped over to the fire. The wincing guard picked up his own sword in one hand, and with his other he threw the wine bottle at the back of the stranger's cloaked head. The bottle smashed, and the guard saw the opportunity to strike his stunned enemy. As the sword came falling through the air, the dazed assailant instinctively picked up the smaller guard's sword and parried the oncoming blow. Sparks flew as the two blades clashed. The injured soldier continued to strike blow for blow, growing more and more infuriated with every deflected attack. The cloaked figure noticed the smaller guard regaining his feet and kicked a pile of smouldering ash into his eyes. The taller, oh my god, The taller guard lunged forward, sword first, which the assassin swiftly countered. The cloaked warrior with practiced skill guided his opponent's sword past his cloak and into the smaller guard behind. The shorter man choked on the blood that filled his throat. A strangled groan followed as his shocked, bloodshot eyes traced over the sword jutting from his side, straight back to the hands of his friend. He slumped forward after his equally shocked friend finally withdrew the blade. The taller guard screamed and his grip tightened around his bloody sword. His whole body was seething. With a mighty cry, he threw his arms full force at the assassin, but was stopped mid-air by the stab of an opposing blade. It squelched as it was forced under his chin, scraping his jaw and teeth. The assassin pushed harder until the tip of the sword broke through the soldier's skull. The soldier's eyes rolled in their sockets with a final twist of the weapon. The assassin let go of the sword, leaving the weight of it to pull the guard's lifeless frame to the ground. Relief swept through Brianna as she had watched her attackers justly reap their karma, but soon that relief was replaced with another sinking wave of distress as her cloaked rescuer inauspiciously approached. Please, don't hurt me, Brianna sobbed. She had every chance to flee during the fight and wished she'd have seized the opportunity. The stranger knelt down to Brianna, and at that moment the redhead was sure she was going to be killed. The stranger lifted the oversized hood and pulled it back with a blood-soaked hand. Brianna stared in absolute shock as she saw that it was Kara. How in the hell had she been able to fight off two men? Once again, she had saved her from imminent danger. Brianna cried in relief and pulled Kara into a tight embrace. This is Aiden's attempt at looking after you, I see. The warm liquid soothed Brianna's throat, and she lowered the small mug of herbal tea to the table. Eiley was sat straight across from her. On closer inspection, the elderly woman's features were ugly by standard definition. She had a deep-set frown, liver spots, and a large bulbous nose that took up a third of her face, but her eyes held a strange warmth to them, almost calming. Kara stood, leaning against the mantelpiece, quietly watching the fire dance in the hearth beneath. She hadn't spoken of what had happened She hadn't spoken of what had happened with her ghostly gin child. She doesn't have a ghostly gin child. Right. Oh, God. She hadn't spoken of what had happened with the ghostly gin child, and no one dared ask her. Her presence was significant enough that she had escaped death. Aiden sat in a nearby armchair, trying his best not to fall asleep. Like you people at home. Woo! Oh. I don't suppose you've got any tequila lying about anywhere? Brianna chuckled. I assume you mean alcohol. No. Now, if you have any serious questions, you do best to ask them promptly, Eiley said. That was a serious question. Her proud smile faded as the other three simply looked at her with schooled expressions. Brianna felt like she had just made a joke at a priest's funeral. That was a poor analogy considering the previous night's happenings. Tough crowd, Brianna muttered, and chased the words down with another sip of her tea. She pushed and pulled the small wooden cup over the table as she tried to formulate a serious question. Okay. Am I dead? Aiden suddenly sat upright in his chair and choked on his breath. Are you dead? Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not in Bedlam, right? This is like some weird fairy tale land, even though with that ghost thing and those rapey assholes, I'm guessing this isn't your average they all lived happily ever after kind of place. Out of the other three, Kara was the only one to find Brianna's cynical comment amusing, but instead of answering Brianna, Cara simply smirked and ran her hand along the mantelpiece. Eiley, however, remained stoic and stared intensely at Brianna. "You are not dead," Eiley answered. "Okay, good." Brianna leaned forward and lowered her chin. She was relieved. "So, where am I?" Then Sarah, Aiden offered. "The forces of Hallis and evil are racing to open the Hellmouth when the veil Eiley was cut off by Cara, who cleared her throat, quite loudly. Eiley grew impatient and slapped the table. "There is no time to make pleasantries. She will learn this on her path." Cara rolled her eyes. She dragged the remaining chair out noisily and plonked herself down at the table. Brianna was taken aback by Cara's actions, but curiously waited for an explanation. "You are a key that can open and close a great door. One that for the last 2,000 or so years has remained tightly shut. However, with the beginning of a new eon, the door has become a little loose. I know it's a lot to take in, but you are the only one who can keep it locked for the next 2,000 years. Cara took a breath and smugly held Eiley's disapproving gaze. "It sounds to me that you need a really good carpenter or a locksmith or something. I'm just a waitress." By the elders, Eiley stood up from her chair and pointed accusingly at Cara. "You stupid girl with your tripe. Now she thinks this is a joke." Eiley, she has no idea what's going on. That was true. Brianna found herself nodding and shrugging in agreement. If she ever had a clue, it had taken a one-way ticket straight to Baffledom. "Thanks to you and that loggerhead of yours." Eiley tapped Cara's skull, which provoked a none-too-amused look from the dark-haired woman. "Enough." Eiley, as fast as she physically could, hobbled over to a small bookshelf. "In Marnus you will find the Signum. Chamberlain's men stole it from the Temple Domina after the March on Freda 12 years ago." Eiley pulled out 2 books. The old woman blew the dust and cobwebs off in a wheezy, strained breath. Brianna watched as a couple of spiders landed haphazardly across the floor and scurried into the floorboard crevices. Her attention quickly reverted back to the stern elderly woman. "You must find the Signum and take it back to Freda." "Take it back, but Eiley," Aiden said. Eiley slammed the books onto the table. Her prominent brow dipped, casting an ominous shadow over her face. Aiden almost swallowed his tongue at Eiley's changed demeanour, and he promptly slunk back in his chair. Brianna also quietly shuffled back in her own seat. A couple of inches missed, and Eiley would have slammed the books right onto her lap. The redhead's nose scrunched up. She could smell mould and grot quite strongly, and she knew it was from the pages of the books. "Take the Signum back to Freda. It is the only way to unlock the Veritas. You must leave now. Do not wait for daylight." And after Freda, Cara seriously asked, "Return here. Remember this, Hallis waits for no man. Asmodeus and his sister Leviathan will not stop until their prince has attained his own Veritas. After that, I can only imagine how they will further his war hand." Brianna's mouth hung open slightly as she tried her best to follow every word that Eiley spoke. She quickly slurped her tea to hide the dopey expression. "Definitely not a fairy tale by the sounds of things." That is chapter 1 and 2. Thank you. Good evening and good night. Yeah. Wow. I am so sorry for all of the mistakes. It's not easy. Just reading. Jeez. How was that? Are you intrigued to find out what happens? I think the next video I'll be doing chapter 3 and 4. If you can't wait till then, Nexus is actually available as a paper book and also an ebook. So yeah, I think it's like 99p or something, the Kindle version. So yeah, and just in case like my Brummy accent offended anyone, yeah, you can read it yourself. Thank you for watching it, if you did stick around to watch it all. If you've put me on and you are currently asleep, I hope you sleep well. What else? Yeah, subscribe, guys, girls, non-binds. Anyone who stuck around, basically, if you're not asleep. If you're asleep, subscribe in your sleep. Maybe I should do one of those hypno things, sleep hypno things. Yeah, give me your money. I'm joking, I don't want anyone's money. Thank you. That's it, I think. Yeah. Wow. I think that's my longest video so far on the channel, so... Ooh. I thought I was going to read the whole book in one sitting, but not a chance. Not a chance. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. That's it. Stay awesome, stay classy. Make sure to drink sensibly if you drink alcohol. That's it. Okay, bye. I'm just giving myself a round of applause for getting through chapter 1 and chapter 2. Jesus, now I've got to edit this.